Why am I standing here on railroad tracks? Well, I feel that railroad tracks defined St. Louis in the mid-19th century. These tracks here go all the way west, begin in the east. Ultimately, these tracks do arrive at California. That would have been Thomas Hart Benton's dream. As early as the 1830s, city leaders began the push for railroads. They knew that the city's future in westward expansion would be accomplished by train, and the city wanted its piece of manifest destiny. The first step in achieving the goal of linking St. Louis to the Pacific was to link the state's political and commercial capitals, a train from St. Louis to Jefferson City. However, not everyone was keen on the idea of railroad expansion. Pro-slavery factions in the city and state viewed railroad as a threat to slavery. Supporters of slavery were concerned a railroad would make it easier for slaves to escape and to make their way to Canada. Southern sympathizers were afraid linking St. Louis to Kansas would allow free state proponents to easily gain access to the territory, where the popular vote would determine whether or not Kansas would become free. It was for these reasons that not everyone was excited on the morning of November 1st, when the first trip from St. Louis to Jefferson City was to take place. Unfortunately, the train would never make it to its destination. As it approached the town of Gasconade, a bridge that had been temporarily placed over the river did not support the weight of the train. It crashed into the river and 31 people died. Despite a successful run just 4 months later from St. Louis to Jefferson City, enthusiasm for rail wavered, and further railroad expansion in St. Louis would have to wait until the end of the Civil War. The hesitation led to Chicago becoming the gateway to the West, once it not only connected rails crossing the Mississippi, but eventually had rails that reached to California. The lack of a connection to the West through St. Louis was emblematic of the culture war taking place in the city at the time. The Northern supporters wanted easy access to Kansas to ensure the territory became free. Benton and westward expansion supporters in the city saw the vitalness of a train linking St. Louis to the territories out west. It would make St. Louis one of the great cities of the country, possibly eclipsing New York. The train would expand business and trade, bringing money to the city. Southern supporters wanted expansion of slavery and to maintain tight control of their existing slaves. That meant no train. Lack of understanding of everyone's position and inability to compromise slowed the development of train travel in St. Louis. In the future, these same tracks and later highways running alongside them would cause St. Louis to be eclipsed not just by Chicago, but many other cities.